Good morning, everyone. My name is Brad Weaver. My pronouns are he and his, and I'm a member of the Worship Associates team. It's my pleasure to welcome all of you to this virtual sacred space where we continue to nourish the spirit, connect in love, and strive for justice, even as we maintain spatial distance from one another. At UUCL, as we like to refer to ourselves, love is our only doctrine, and service and justice are our most sacred prayers. So we pray by striving to live lives in words and deeds that affirm Black Lives Matter. And our doctrine of love has moved us to affirm for decades that love is divine and love is what makes a family. In our progressive spiritual community, we celebrate the many ways that people can nourish the spirit. So we welcome you, whether you hold faith in nature, community, divinity, science, or all of the above, or whether you are not quite so sure what you believe, you are welcome here. You are welcome to journey and grow and seek to live lives filled with love. It's a practice of this congregation to affirm the inspiring wisdom and perspectives that both lay and ordained people of many different beliefs bring to our community. Therefore, one Sunday each month, our minister, Reverend Israel, offers our pulpit up to a guest speaker to inspire us with their message. This Sunday, our guest speaker is the Reverend Shayna Watson from St. James Episcopal Church. Hello, Shayna. Greetings. If everyone could give her a greet. There, she's waving back. Good. Welcome. We also send a warm welcome to anyone who is new here. Thank you for taking the brave step of checking us out. There are many ways to get involved here, and we hope you'll subscribe to our newsletter, the UUCL Love Letter. Please send a direct message to Cindy Pollard or Mandy Metzger if you need help with subscribing. We also invite you to join the special breakout room after the service if you have any questions you would like about Unitarian Universalism or this congregation. So, our call to worship. Let us wake up, not just from Sunday morning exhaustion and the wish for a few more drowsy minutes in bed. Let us wake up to this world we live in, its beauty and wonder, and also its tragedy and pain. Let us awake to our sisters and brothers who do not have what we do, however much or little that is. Let us wake up to the reality that our wholeness, our lives, are only complete as the lives of those around us, of those we are tied to in a great interdependent web of life of which we are all part. Yes, let us wake up, stay awake, and stay woke. And now, in this time, in this space, let us worship together. We now come to the part where we can light our chalices. So if you have a chalice with you or nearby, it's time to get that, to strike a match or to turn on the candle. Okay, so I'm going to turn on my candle today. There we go. So we light this chalice in remembrance of those who laid down the foundation of our communities in the spirit of freedom and love and tolerance, to remember that true light will outshine darkness. So could you all please join in singing our hymn, which is Far Too Long by Fear Divided.
Far too long by fear divided, we have settled with a sword quarrels which should be decided by the reconciled word. Now the nations are united, though as yet in name alone, and the distant goal is sighted, which the prophet's souls have shown. May at last we cease from warring, barriers of hate remove, and earth's riches freely sharing, found the dynasty of love.
Our next section will be the Time for All Ages, which Lenore has done a recording for this. So if we could have Lenore's recording.
Hi, everybody. I'm Lenore, and my pronouns are she and her, and I serve this congregation as the Director of Lifespan Faith Development. And I am sending this to you from a collaboration with my friend and colleague, E.B. Bromley, who serves our neighboring UU Berks as the Director of Religious Education and Music. Welcome, E.B.
Thank you. So, as many of you know, Martin Luther King Day is tomorrow. And in many Unitarian Universalist congregations and in many communities, we usually talk about it as a sacred day for honoring history and taking action for justice. But Martin Luther King was also a powerful uncoverer of truth. His speeches challenged people, especially white people, to see the world and its racist, violent systems more truly. And by the way, when we talk about seeing, we could also talk about hearing or feeling or any of our senses, because there are so many ways to experience this world, right?
That's true, E.B. And you know, I've been thinking about how truth-seeking is at the heart of our Unitarian Universalist faith. And so for today, right now, let's explore that sacred aspect of MLK Day, seeking the truth.
We seek the truth not only in big ways, but in small ways too. Like sometimes we might wake up in the morning and our eyes are still sleepy and we gotta rub them open. Rub them to see more clearly.
Yes. And actually last week with UUCL, we looked at this fun thing. And I thought it would be really fun to explore together. And so for some people in my congregation who've already seen this, for you, I invite to notice what you didn't before. So take a look at these dots with the red cellophane. How many dots do you see, if any? You want to guess in the chat?
Lenore, I'm having a hard time seeing dots. Can you pull a red cellophane and to look up at all the dots?
Okay.
Wow, I could not have guessed that many dots when we were looking at it with the red cellophane. How many? What do you notice?
Well, you know, as people are putting that in the chat, I'll share that many people whose skin is white, like yours and mine, think that we are seeing the world the way things really are. But it's really like we are seeing the dots through the red cellophane, Evie. We may have no idea that there are even dots that we are not seeing. Could you tell here that there were some dots underneath?
No, I mean, it was really hard.
And so this less complete view of the world could even seem normal, but it's not.
Yeah. People with darker skin colors usually have had to practice seeing the world more than one way. Because they've had to get along in the world that has white people in charge of lots of things.
And you know, for our kids who are in school, have you ever noticed that sometimes maybe a black kid gets in more trouble than a white kid who was doing the exact same thing? And if you haven't noticed that, is it perhaps possible that you also have been looking through the cellophane? Because parents of color have told me that this happens often, and so have people who study these things. Maybe not in every classroom, but often. And this can really hurt kids in the moment to be punished more harshly, and it could even really hurt their future. And that's just one example about how learning more isn't just this sort of nice thing that we do because we love learning, although we love learning. It's actually really urgent to see the world as it is.
And it's a spiritual act, too, to do that uncovering. As a faith community, seeing and hearing and feeling and sensing the world as it really is a spiritual need. People are deeply hurt from racism.
And because our full history and that full hurt is usually not taught in schools, it's up to all of us, everybody, to learn more about the world in our homes and in our faith communities. Did you know that babies can already learn to appreciate, or not appreciate, but to appreciate skin colors of many hues?
And elementary age kids of all identities can learn about how their neighborhoods are still affected by racial segregation.
And all of our adults can work on seeing how our history really impacts the present, too. And we're doing all of that this year. So one reason that Evie and I wanted to share this time together is that our congregations are working together starting next month to offer anti-racism curriculum for children in grades K through 2 and also in grades 3 through 5. Just as our adults and also our youth are going to have the chance to continue their racial justice conversations and to read about the buried history of colonization and more. So we're all learning and growing this year, knowing that there are actually many layers of cellophane to lift. Because seeking truth is at the core of who we hope and who we work to be as Unitarian Universalists.
So we hope you look out for in your newsletter for more information to continue this work together.
Our meditation today is entitled To Embody the Dream of Martin Luther King. I invite you now into a quiet time, a time for spoken and silent contemplation. Spirit of life, we have come into each other's presence this day, seeking a part of ourselves, knowing that we do not live alone, and knowing we cannot live fully if we are for ourselves alone. We gather in thanks for the life and the ministry of Martin Luther King Jr., not because we worship him as a saint, but because we wish to embody his dream as a possibility we make real. We gather with full knowledge of our shortcomings, our lives set before us many tasks, and often we are not equal to them. We fall short of our own expectations. We find we do not know enough. We are not always patient. We fall into anger. Often we cannot find strength. We lack vision. We wait in vain for wisdom. It's painful to acknowledge our shortcomings, yet we are here, Spirit of life. We are here, not always perfect, not always wise, not always just, but wonderfully and mysteriously human and alive. We dedicate this time together to renewing our hope. May the stories we share give us courage. May the songs we sing give us hope. May the words we speak give us wisdom. And most of all, may the touch of hands, maybe even virtually hands, right? The sight of the faces here in our screens, the sound of voices lifted in song and affirmation, restore in us the faith that this world may be made whole and with all its people one. Amen. And if we could all join together now with singing Spirit of Life.
Spirit of life, come unto me, sing in my heart all the stirrings of compassion, blow in the wind, rise in the sea, move in the hand, giving life the shape of justice, rooted
And now we come to our offering. We take an offering each time we gather because we recognize that we need each other to survive. Our offering is a way for us to affirm the life-giving service that this progressive spiritual community provides. When we give, we affirm our support for our values, freedom of conscience and belief, LGBTQ+ affirmation, racial justice, and respect for the interconnected web that we are all a part of. During the month of January, we are sharing our offering with the Crispus Attucks Community Center, a nonprofit that supports the preservation of African American cultural heritage and empowers youth and families to reach their full potential. You can support this work as you are able by texting the amount of your donation to 855-927-3685. You can also give via the contribute tab on the homepage of our website at uuclonline.org or by mailing a check to our office. The offering will now be gratefully received. Before Reverend Shayna shares with you of her story, her life story today, I'd like to share with you how Reverend Shayna came to be our guest today. As you know, we have an opening each month for a guest speaker, and the worship associates were considering various people to invite. And I said, I have someone in mind that I would really love to have address us, but I really don't know her. I don't know her, but I sort of know of her. And Shayna, I don't know, I think you've heard a little bit of this story, but a few years ago, I was attending a weekend workshop in the basement of Ebenezer Baptist Church, and it was focused on trauma-informed care. Some of us who were involved with Justice with Mercy, we and work with returning citizens in the Bridge to Community program through the reentry management. We went there. We knew that one of the people speaking that or delivering the workshop that day was Melanie Snyder, who's often been in our pulpit. But that day I discovered that it was co-led and co-hosted by Shayna Watson and Melanie. And I got so much out of that weekend. I was absolutely, it just opened my eyes, not only because of working with returning citizens, but as a teacher. And I remember, I think at every break we had and afterwards, I went up to Shayna and asked her questions. Probably didn't give her much of a break, but I came away really thinking a lot about that weekend. And if we go a little bit forward, you know, I live here at Lancaster Seminary, and I was walking around the seminary and I saw these posters, and I said, wait, that's the lady who, the lady on the poster. They sort of had some of their star graduates. Kevin Ressler was there, and I'm like, that's the lady who delivered the weekend workshop. Jump forward a little bit later, I was at the cathedral in Harrisburg, St. Stephen's Cathedral. Shayna Watson is there as a canon pastor, and later at St. James. So Shayna, I keep bumping into you, and then discover that you also work with the religious affairs group at NAACP. So I was so excited, and I thought, let's invite you here. So I'm going to share with you all just a bit from her bio before she speaks. As you can also, you want to know more about her, if you turn to the St. James website under the clergy, you'll see her bio there. Shayna is born and raised in Lancaster. Her family is originally from South Carolina, but she grew up here. She was ordained as a priest in 2019 and served as St. Stephen's Cathedral, and then came to be associate rector at St. James. Shayna is a University of Pittsburgh grad with a dual major in political science and African diasporic studies. And a very formative event in her life as a student was taking a semester at sea. And I guess that meant you went around the world on a ship, and you visited, wow, Japan, China, Vietnam, Malaysia, from Brazil and Cuba, you were able to go everywhere. Wonderful. And Reverend Shayna earned her Master's of Divinity from Lancaster Theological Seminary and her Anglican Studies diploma from the Virginia Theological Seminary. She is a board certified chaplain and served in hospital and hospice settings at the Penn State Hershey Medical Center and Children's Hospital, Lancaster General Hospital, and the Hospice and Community Care. Shayna is also a community activist who has served, and I believe with the Religious Affairs Chair at the NAACP. I believe tonight you are the creator and organizer of the annual Martin Luther King service, which is online every year. It's the big service before the breakfast that would have been tomorrow at Holy Trinity. Shayna has quite a track record of organizing community events and fundraisers, offering anti-racism and cultural sensitivity platform, and developing innovative ways to converse about challenging topics. And I'm going to directly read from this because this was really something why I wanted her to come today. One of her pastoral passions is to work with veterans and populations who experience post-traumatic stress. And at the core of what she does is a capacity to network, collaborate, and form partnerships with community members and interfaith groups and audiences who do not find church safe. Okay, so that speaks to our Unitarian hearts, Shayna. So Shayna is also the creator and co-founder of Theocon, which is a one-day comic convention style event where theology meets pop culture. So maybe you could say a little bit about that at the end. So without further ado, Shayna, if you could unmute and share with us about your life.
All right. Can you hear me? Awesome. Thank you for that fantastic introduction and for the invitation, Brad, for having me here to speak with you all this morning, offering a reflection of my journey and how it intersects with the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s call to action, call to justice, and living out his dream. So, as mentioned, I currently serve as a priest, as an associate rector at St. James, where David Peck is the lead rector. And yes, I have a one-day comic book convention style event called Theocon. Theocon combines two words. It combines theology with convention. So it's styled and modeled after the New York Comic Con or San Diego Comic Con. And we literally have these conversations about the intersectionality of faith and fiction, where the secular meets the sacred. So we explore themes of redemption as found in Star Wars, or we would talk about what does forgiveness look like according to C.S. Lewis, and so we utilize all sorts of popular culture mediums, social influencers, whether it's music, literature, art. So we have a lot of fun with TheoCon, and since we are no longer in person, a lot of our events and conversations are taking place online. So I have been neglecting it lately, though, since I started St. James this past June. We've just been so busy in our own individual work. I work with a team in TheoCon, and so hoping to do some updating and some maintenance to our TheoCon site and Facebook page. So um, I'm loving the service so far, and thank you for modeling how a congregation, a group can integrate worship with social justice awareness and do it really well. And the music was so reflective and meditative, which is the space that I'm in right now. So thank you for allowing me the opportunity to be a part of the fellowship leading up to this speaking moment. What I find most interesting with the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. is that his I Have a Dream speech is very popular. There's so much packed into it. It's what we often refer to or think about when we think about MLK and MLK commemoration services. Part of my thought this morning and what I see my journey aligning with is a speech that is lesser known that took place a few months after King's I Have a Dream speech. And it occurred at, I believe it was Western Michigan University. And it was King's call to be creatively maladjusted. King's call to be creatively maladjusted. And in his speech, he refers to maladjustment in being nonconformant, being not complacent or comfortable with what is normal or what is deemed normal. And during that time, especially, the normalization of racial prejudice manifested in discriminatory practices and racial prejudice attitudes, poverty, and of course, when he later took on his anti war stance. So the call to be creatively maladjusted, a call into a form of radical empathy, is something that I certainly resonate with, especially in my journey. In talking about social justice and civil rights movements, I recall mostly the videos that I've seen growing up in the documentaries with the dogs and the fire hoses and the violence that occurred with young children of color, desegregating schools. And we see those modes of actions. However, we don't often think about the contemplative actions that occurred during the movement, the modes of prayer and the invitation into a non-striving type of mentality, but rather more or less conversational and prayerful. So, what I'm seeing and feeling more, and what I found in chaplaincy work, which is part of the reason why I have a passion around post traumatic stress and how some veterans live with that, is because they have literally seen war and somehow their bodies created a form of resilience to it. So they're surviving and living with and trying to navigate this trauma and how to transform that pain into power that is constructive and in a way that is not toxic or perpetuates continual hurt, harm, or danger to other people that they encounter. And I see that as a blueprint for justice work. How do we tap into our source of pain and suffering and transform it into radical empathy in a way that what King says, We are not here to defeat our enemies, but rather change their attitudes. It's not a war against the physical person, the physical presence, but rather it's a war against attitudes. It's a war to win hearts. It's a war to win minds. So that's where I am, and that's where I found in chaplaincy that intersection of both pastoral care and justice work. The justice work is being liberated by old habits or attitudes that create suffering, that cause racial prejudice, whether it's stemming from fear, whether it's stemming from misinformation, whether it's stemming from a form of survival, if someone had experienced violence from someone who does not look like them, and now there's an impression that's created. So, how do we give our bodies the justice that it deserves so that we can live life more fully and more abundantly? Right? So, in some of the circles in anti racism work that I've encountered, I noticed that there are several conversations that are happening for people of color, Black people, and white people. White folks are experiencing guilt and shame, embarrassment, or defensiveness because it's hard to come into a new reality. Like everything that we once knew is now broken. It's grief work. It's grief work. We're grieving the loss, not because we're going to miss it, but rather because of the pain and the process and all the feelings of grief that we experience, the denial, the anger, the shock. And for people of color, it's like, well, how do we heal from the internalized racial oppression that we've embodied and have been socialized and conditioned in from the time we were young? How do we view ourselves, and how do we view our white brothers and sisters? So for me, I look at this overall context through the lens of being creatively maladjusted. We can't approach abnormal situations trying to do what we've always done. We have to think creatively outside of the box. I know that sounds cliche at this time, but it's true. And we need to be reminded because we're constantly changing and evolving. Even now, we are using technology a lot more. So, how does this translate from in person conversations when we could read body language or put our hand on someone's shoulder to show that we do care and we do concern? How does that translate into our little boxes now on Zoom? So, we're constantly changing with the advancement of technology, research, and also research in what is helpful and how these engagements can continue to inform how we interact with one another. So, in terms of if I had to give this reflection a title, it would probably be King's Call to Being Creatively Maladjusted, or um, Mutterings from an Irreverent Reverend. I tend to think that while I find my roots in Christianity, my exposure to various faith groups, non faith groups, and just the moral compass of humanity and how it's so unique to the individual has really opened my eyes. As a chaplain witnessing death, life, births, I've been exposed to so much, and all of the things that I've come to learn about God and the world. I've learned that it's not always the case, and it's not a cookie cutter that applies to everyone. In many final moments when some were dying, as a chaplain, I covered the southern end of Lancaster County, which is known to be more conservative, or at least I will say stereotypically, because there are many who live in the southern end of Lancaster who are progressive and liberal thinking. However, when I was serving there, I would constantly pass by Confederate flags, which for me as a woman of color is triggering because it denotes a history that I've learned was violent toward my people and my community of people. So having to enter into some of these homes to administer care to the dying was quite interesting. But for me, it was always, I approach a patient with a Confederate flag on their porch the same way I would otherwise. I approach ministry with integrity because all I see before I see or hear about race or gender is that I see pain and suffering. I learned this model mostly during, and some of you might not remember, but it was during maybe 1998. Matthew Shepard, who identified as a same gender loving individual. He was around my age. I was entering into college, undergrad at the time, and he was beaten to death because of bigotry, because of hatred toward the LGBT community. And they found later the person who had beaten him, both Matthew and this individual happened to be in the hospital either at the same time or at different times. And I'll never forget what this doctor has said. He said, in one room I had the victim and in the other room I had the culprit. And as a doctor, I have an oath to save life. And in my mind at that time, I was like, let the culprit die. We don't need any more of the hatred perpetuated. Like, why? But there was something that just sunk deep into my soul and into my spirit that just said, there was a brokenness in this other person as well. And what if this could be an opportunity to transform and to save his life in a way that is transforming so that he too can go out and transform others who think in such a toxic way as he has had. And of course, Matthew is deceased now and he's honored in our national cathedral in Washington, D.C. But that modeling first with Matthew Shepard, connecting with him and his journey and his tragic death, the being informed by the doctor and approaching with equal integrity is really how I approach this work. How do I approach with equal integrity? I get criticism from some friends and colleagues about being too soft or, like, why, we need more action. Yes, we need to act. And we also need to sit with. It's about faith and works. It's about the balance for both, with the both and, which is where I find that healing and justice piece where they intersect. I think I'm almost at time. I don't want to go over. So more recently, I returned to Lancaster after serving in the cathedral, St. Stephen's Cathedral in Harrisburg, as Braden mentioned. So I came back like between May, June, in the midst of pandemic and protests, and also shortly after the murder, the killing of George Floyd. And so that period of time was most difficult, and yet it wasn't new. It was an awakening for many who either have been in denial or avoiding or having the privilege of not being exposed to such atrocities. However, it's tragic, and because it has been reoccurring, what do we do and how do we respond in a way that is effective in our communities? How are we being called into works of healing and conversations and movement and actions? So with the religious affairs of the NAACP in Lancaster, I have a meeting coming up called, I think it's called Pandemic, Healing in the Midst of Pandemic and Protests, looking forward, or looking backward and moving forward. So something to that effect of how do we still honor our past while yet moving forward? How do we still look at our past and not be anchored by it or consumed by it, which to me comes up a lot. Sometimes we're just angry, and it's okay, but it's because of unresolved, unaddressed issues that have boiled up for us. So we really need to treasure these moments of pauses and reflections, I believe we need to be creatively maladjusted in our approach to justice and in our approach to healing. So, in echoing King's call and living out King's dream, this has become such a major part of my journey. And I know that I think I'll be in a breakout room afterward to answer further questions. But I hope that my irreverent reverend ramblings this morning kind of provided a little deeper insight into my journey into the healing arts and where it intersects with justice and some of the work that I am currently involved in as well. So I want to thank you all for allowing me this time to speak with you this morning, and may we all live out King's dream and King's call in being creatively maladjusted.
Thank you so much, Reverend Shayna. Boy, when you said that word creatively maladjusted, I'm sure every UU ear turned that way. It's a wonderful term. I've never heard it, but boy, I'm going to make that my my watchword. And thank you also for, and to St. James and to Father Peck, for making this interfaith experience, possible. Your church and our church are very much part of the Interfaith Alliance. And your church's racial justice group has reached out to ours and been in communication. And I really look forward to types of alliance work and showing up for each other and things like that. So welcome again and again. Okay, so we now have a hymn. So if you could please join in singing the hymn, "A Gentle, Angry People."
Mayor Miss Tony, who were assassinated is why I wrote this song.
Thank you.
We're standing out for gay rights. Okay.
now is the time to extinguish our chalices. It is our work shared with each other in covenant that creates and sustains this beloved community. We extinguish this chalice. But its light lives on in the directions we have chosen today. The light of this faith lives on in us, together in our hearts, minds, bodies, and spirits. Amen and blessed be.
One of these mornings we shall rise in the clouds. We'll have broken. Glimmer of sun shines through your eyes, and the soft earth has spoken. Feel the mud between your toes with a sigh. You are kiss the morning sunlight and this path you've chosen.
When you were young, you built you a sail to catch life's winds a blowing. Pulled up the anchor, pushed off from the shore. You were off a roaming, but the winds turned cruel and made you a fool. Now you feel mistaken, held by the threads of a tattered sail, a dream that wind has taken. One of these mornings we shall rise in the clouds. We'll have broken. Glimmer of sun shines through your eyes, and the soft earth has spoken. Feel the mud between your toes with a sigh. You are kiss the morning sunlight and this path you've chosen. Something left you, something near, gone far away. A sad eye and empty tear, caught in the pieces of yesterday. This tattered sail has become your veil, a shroud you won't let go. Peering at life through a tangle of threads of all you've lost and known. Stories of the sea abound. You've been looking for the ground. Waves will always be up and down, tired of tossing around.
A sail could carry you far away,
but your eyes are asking me, how do I stay? One of these mornings we shall rise in the clouds. We'll have broken. Glimmer of sun shines through your eyes, and the soft earth has spoken. Feel the mud between your toes with a sigh.
you are open. Kiss the morning sun.